Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Drew. I'm an exercise physiologist and Chinese medicine practitioner. And today we're going to be looking at the psoas major muscle, origin, insertion, actions, and some ways to stretch it and strengthen it. One of the key muscles in any back problem, pretty much 9 out of 10 people is going to have some kind of involvement with their psoas, usually in the acute phase. And also if they have chronic back pain, it's going to be very much connected to why they keep getting back pain. And as we go through the video, you'll get to see that. So we're going to be using muscle in motion. Here we're on the anatomy app and we're down in the origin insertion under theory if you want to follow along and get your own copy. So let me bring this up, get me out of the way a little bit. So definitely get yourself a copy if you haven't already. So this is the psoas muscle, very strong, powerful muscle. And you can see it kind of attaches onto the lumbar spine. And as you see, it'll go into the femur here. So we have L5, L4, L3, L2, L1, and T12. So the psoas muscle attaches onto the vertebral body and the transverse processes. So these kind of parts here. And got the little man here. Get me out of the way. So the whole, basically, your lumbar spine is where your psoas attaches. We also have this yellow muscle here. This is called the iliacus. And the iliacus shares a common tendon with the psoas. So they basically go to the same spot. Very similar to the calf, how you've got the gastrocnemius on top and then you've got the sleeves underneath, and they kind of come into the Achilles tendon, and it shares a common attachment point. You can see it merges with the iliacus as it passes across the hip here. And let it play out a little bit longer. Get a little man come out. And you can see here, this is the attachment point. Insertion, distal attachment, lesser trochanter of the femur. So this is the femur, this green bone here. And a lesser trochanter is this kind of protrusion that's inferior to the neck of the femur. And this is where it's attaching here. So it's on the inside of the leg, up high in the groin. So you can see this big knobbly bit here. Very, very powerful, strong attachment point. And you can see the psoas muscle kind of goes across the pubic ramus here. So that's the pubic bone there. So it's going to come across. And this is where all your abs attach to here as well, like your rectus abdominis. This is where your abdominals attach to. So your psoas and your core muscles. Your psoas is basically a part of your core. You can't separate the two out, and you'll see that as we progress. Okay. So the nerve root. So you got L1, L2, L3 nerve. So any kind of back injury, like particularly disc pathology that compresses this nerve, it's going to affect the psoas, and that'll either make it inhibited, so basically make it weak, which is very not good, and or it can make it hypertonic or spasm or increase its tone, so it contracts but then doesn't relax fully. So typically it's either going to go one way or the other depending on how the person presents. So anywhere in this kind of middle upper back, middle upper, lower upper back is where you're going to get the flexion. All right, action. So hip flexion is the main one. So lifting your knee up towards your chest. Okay, so you're going to have a strong pull from the lower back, lifting up the femur. And then we have hip flexion, but the other way. So now the leg is anchored. So like you're doing sit-ups and someone's holding your feet, or you got your feet wedged underneath a support. And now you got the hip flexor muscle contracting and it's pulling on the lumbar vertebrae. And so that's going to lift your torso up. So like you're doing a sit-up. This is one of the reasons why sit-ups got a really bad rap for lower back pain, because when you're doing these sit-ups, you're pulling on this muscle and you're pulling on the lumbar spine. But as you'll see as we get into it, it's really important that we get this muscle strong. The issue is the wrong type of sit-up at the wrong level, the wrong progression, at the wrong time. So it's not the exercise, it's just when you use it is the problem. Okay, so we have lateral rotation. So this one here, so look at where the kneecap is going outwards, it's turning outwards. So you got to imagine this kind of circle going around. So the shaft of the femur is going out, it's rotating out. So that's lateral rotation. Okay. And that brings the leg in. So if you do something like pigeon pose, where you swing your leg into the middle, that's a little bit of psoas is helping you do that action there. Now, if you have a really tight hip flexor, what can happen is that your femur can be pulled into the lateral rotation whilst you're trying to squat or to lunge or to hinge. And that may give you some issues in terms of being able to do that exercise correctly because the femur's in the wrong position. You can see all this kind of ball and socket rotation that's happening in here. Okay, so as you're moving up and down, so like from a squat or from a hinge or from a lunge, this ball's designed to rotate, but if you're already in the end range, because you're so tight, it won't rotate. And so it's going to get jammed up in the femur. So often this tight hip flexor or very strong but short tight hip flexor can manifest in the kinetic chain down below. And here we can increase lordosis. This is a great example here. So we've got this strong pull of the psoas here. Okay, pulling on the lower back. So the lower back's going to flex, okay, or arch, or increase its lordosis. So lumbar, not flex, sorry, extend. The lumbar extension, okay, where you increase your arch is the same thing as lumbar anterior tilt. So when you anterior tilt the pelvis, you put your spine into extension, okay, and that increases the arch. So if someone's lower back is chronic for whatever reason, what happens is that the psoas muscle becomes hypertonic, is really, really strong and tight and stiff, and it holds the lumbar in that kind of extended position. So then it can't move into flexion, extension. And if you can't move your spine into flexion, means you can't engage your abdominals on the front correctly because they're spinal flexors. They flex the spine. So these two muscles, they kind of do the opposite things in a sense. So when you're doing a lot of leg lever work with your legs, where you're lowering your legs up and down, like a flutter kick or a toe tap or a bicycle, you're getting this strong weight of the legs, kind of trying to create an anterior tilt. At the same time, you're using your abs to maintain neutral spine. So you use your weight of your legs to strengthen not only the hip flexors, but also the core muscles themselves. So it depends what happens. Now, and there is another type of back problem where people get stuck in, I'll come back a little bit here. Okay, this is not lordosis, this is fully flexed. So where you go into pelvic posterior tilt, a posterior pelvic tilted, a posterior tilted pelvis. Okay, again, these muscles have become really, really short, but just the angle of shiftment, they're now stuck in posterior pelvic tilt. And what you get here is then you get kind of passive insufficiency of the glutes. So when you take a muscle to its shortened range and it can't cross move anymore, it can't grab it and so it can't contract. And so basically it won't generate force. So then the glutes here become really, really, really weak because you're too far tilted into posterior tilt, but you're not coming out of it, so you're moving in and out of anterior posterior tilt. So that can create a really, really weak glute muscle. So that is often referred to as the flat back kind of postural syndrome. And that's one of the really hardest ones to develop because you have to slowly retrain everything. You have to slowly stretch and strengthen the psoas and the abs and then get the glutes firing and the hamstrings firing. It's quite a long, tricky process. And people who are usually in this kind of flat back posture, nothing's really working very well functionally, and they're just in a lot of pain, chronic pain, because they're essentially just resting on their joints. Now, we also assist in lateral flexion. So that's your side bending. So this is one of the best ways to strengthen your lower back and hip flexors. And you can do this in lots of different ways, but the simple one is side planks. So it's really, really good. or in this demonstration here, they've got the feet anchored and you're literally just kind of coming up in lateral flexion from the side. Okay. But a side plank is a really good option, because then also in the side plank, you're going to get obliques and your QLs fine as well. So really, really good. So you can again see the role it has on the back. Now, strength exercises. So simple but really hard is our hanging leg raises or knee raises. So you're going to lift your knees up to your chest while you're hanging off a pull-up bar. So one, you get the grip strength and just the hanging strength, which we know is really good for your overall health. You're going to use some lower abdominals to kind of tuck your tailbone under. So you're creating a bit of a posterior pelvic tilt here as you round out. At the same time, hip flexors are lifting your knees up towards your chest against gravity. So you've got the entire weight of your legs against gravity and you're lifting up with your abs. So it's quite a really good exercise. So you can see here, this is where the hip flexors are going to lift your knees to chest. Okay, similar kind of concept here is resisted hip flexion. So here you've got a pulling machine with an ankle attachment, and you're bringing your knee towards your chest. And so you've got the resistance now of the actual cable system. And the advantage of this one is you can load up progressively and you can kind of easily do one leg or two legs together. So it's a really, really good exercise to do to get this kind of hip flexor mechanism strong. And you'll be using your psoas, your abdominals, a little bit of your kind of rack fem, your quad muscles, sartorius, any of the hip flexors, some of the adductors as well. You're lying down, so you're really supported. So you can take a little bit more pressure off the lower back, and you can really progress this and scale this. Even just starting with no weight, where you extend the leg out and then back in, kind of like a single leg extension or a bicycle, because in this position, you're working against gravity. So gravity is pushing your leg down. And so as you extend the leg out, you're really working against that position. So you can get lots of strengthening of just using your body weight only, but you would need to kind of increase the repetitions. And the trick here is to maintain a fairly neutral spine. So there's two versions. You can come into a slight sit-up position where your back is pressed into the floor, or you can stay neutral spine. It really just depends on the individual, what they were trying to achieve. A really good exercise, really good exercise. And the two stretches. So here we have a foam roller. And so what you're going to do here is you're going to extend the leg over the foam roller so we can get the hip into extension, which means bringing the leg behind the body. And that way you can stretch out the psoas and the iliacus. And remember, when we're stretching muscle, all we need to do is simply reverse the action. Okay. So if they do hip flexion here, all we need to do is just bring it into hip extension. Okay. If you want to make it a little bit stronger, you can activate the glutes here. So when the leg's out straight, you can squeeze your butt and imagine you're trying to pull your leg down. That'll help reciprocally inhibit or relax the psoas as well. And you're keeping this knee kind of tucked in towards your chest, and that just maintains the pelvic position. So when you take your leg out, your pelvis doesn't roll too far up, and then you get a little bit of compression or jamming in your lower back, which can be uncomfortable. If you don't have a foam roller, you can just do this off the edge of the bench. It's quite easy to do. And if you're super tight, when you do this movement, if you line your back of your knees to your chest and just pull your knee right into your chest so that your lower back is flat on the floor. And if you take your leg out and your leg's like sticking up in the air, and when the knee is straight, you know you've got a lot of work to do, because this is a really tight hip flexor complex. So you can see as you pull the knee into the chest, it creates more anterior tilt, which then puts more stretch on that muscle there as well. Correction, posterior tilt. So from here, that's neutral, and then we're going into more, that's a posterior tilt, and that'll put more stretch onto that hip flexor muscle. And then here, I really like this stretch. This is a modified lunge type stretch, lots of different versions of it, but essentially what you want to do, have your foot elevated. You can even do this on the floor with your feet on the floor. Take your leg out behind you. You can start with your knee on the ground, okay? And then engage your core on the front and then just shift your weight forward into the hips so that you are nice and stable. Light abdominal contraction, light glute contraction to help kind of open up the hip. And then as you progress into it, you can then take the knee off the floor, so come up onto your toes, and then you slowly lunge forward to really get this nice eccentric stretch on the hip flexor. So an eccentric stretch means that the muscle is contracting as it lengthens out, which is the best way to stretch muscles if you can do it that way. So you will develop strength and length in this position, which is what one of the target goals is. So a really, really good way to stretch out your hips. And again, make sure you go and support mobilize muscle and motion. So nice little overview of the psoas. Quick little recap. We have lunging stretch here to open up that one there. Knee to chest stretch, bringing your hip into extension. 2 exercises. We have resisted band knee to chest. And then we have hanging leg raises. Okay. So if you have any questions about your hip flexors and how to train them or how to rehab them, if you've got chronic back pain and you've been struggling with that, please feel free to reach out or drop a question in the comments below. Always happy to answer them. Wherever you are, have a great day and enjoy training, and I'll see you in the next video. All right, so in this video, we're going to be looking at our hanging leg raise. So knees to chest to strengthen up our psoas muscle and our lower fibers of our abdominal wall, so the rectus abdominis, or the classic six-pack muscle. We're also looking at hanging, so we're having this really nice grip strength, which we know is a really good indicator of global strength in the body. So here we go. All you need at home is some kind of chin-up bar or something to hang off. So pretty simple. So let's give it a go. So the first thing when you do the setup is you just want to have a nice strong grip and then just hang and let the shoulders distract. Okay, good. So you're just getting a nice decompression of the spine, and you want to hang here and then just be comfortable and breathe and smile. Okay. Now you're going to bring your knees up to the chest in a little tuck, little pause, and then just lower your legs down nice and slow with control. Okay, breathe in, come up, pause, breathe out lower, breathe in up, pause, breathe out lower. Good. So start off with just a simple 3 reps, and then you can build up to 5 reps, 3 reps to 5, so that's going to be 15 reps. It's a great place to start, and depending what your goal is, you can then start to add in slightly stronger versions, or just maintain that 3 lots of 5. And then next thing, you can add in weights, or like ankle weights, or do a resist pull with the bands. A couple little tricks or tips is that what we want to do is come into that posterior pelvic tilt. So we're really trying to kind of get this scoop under. Okay. Now that scoop comes from the lower fibers of the abdominal wall pulling up. Okay. You get a nice stretch here. Okay. Glutes be a little bit contracted, and we're also using our hip flexor muscles to tuck up. So what you want to think is scoop and tuck to lift the knees up. Okay, so up, tuck, 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 tuck. Then down slowly, all the way, full stretch out if you can. Tuck up, tuck, 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 tuck. Squeeze your lower abs. Down slow. And relax. You're going to get this really, really good lat stretch through here. So not only are you stretching the hip flexors, strengthening the core muscles, but you're also going to start to open up the lats. Now the lats is kind of like the forgotten back muscle of back rehab, mainly because the lats is a huge muscle that attaches into the lumbothoracic fascia. So as you get that long and strong, it'll not only help with your posture, but it'll also just help with your shoulder mobility, your shoulder strength, and your lower back strength and posture. So all good stuff to work on. All right, so now we're looking at a couple of different methods to stretch your hip flexors out, your psoas and your rec fem. And we're going to start from very gentle to something a bit stronger. And so you can kind of pick which one going to work for you. So if we're looking at the psoas particularly, so the way to stretch the psoas is you come into a low lunge position, start with the knee, hip, shoulder, ear in one line. Posterior tilt your pelvis, so you've got to tuck your pelvic bolt under. Think about drawing up your lower abdominals, a little bit of a butt squeeze. And if you're too tight there, you'll get a stretch straight away doing that. Now we want to then bring the hip into extension a little bit. So from here, keeping this core engaged, keeping the glute engaged, keeping the hip level, just lunge forward a little bit until you feel the first kind of stretch up across here. Remember that psoas comes across the pubic ramus and then goes down into the lesser trochanter. So it's going to be very kind of groiny kind of stretch sensation. Keeping that nice neutral spine on. If you want to make it a little bit stronger, then we reach the hand up, turn the palm in, okay, and then stretch up to the roof and then come across the middle a little bit. So remember, one of the actions of the psoas is to do lateral flexion. So we go either way to stretch it. So we come in and we go in lateral flexion to the opposite direction. Okay, and you'll get a nice, pretty intense stretch there. So holding, holding, holding. Good, and then relax. So that's typically the first way we start people getting into their psoas stretching. Now, if their core's really weak, if they're really locked up in the lower back, or if they don't know how to isolate the pelvis into pelvic tilt, so if they don't know how to kind of tilt like this, really difficult for people to kind of get in this stretch. It's quite hard for them to do. So sometimes they need to even regress a bit further and do some kind of basic core work, some pelvic tilting work, so they can understand how to get into this nice pelvic tilt shape here. So ribs are down, abs are on, glutes are on, and you get this nice stretch. Now progressing on further, depending on how your mobility and flexibility is going, you take that same concept and you just lunge a bit further forward. Okay. Now as you're lunging forward, the pelvis is going to start to roll a little bit naturally, so that's fine. You don't want to just keep it fully tucked in. Okay, let it roll a little bit, but keep those core muscles engaged so you've got that pelvic control. Otherwise you'll just dump into your lower back like that. So you'll just kind of go boop, dump into your lower back, and that tight psoas muscle is going to like then just pull into your lumbar spine and it'll feel really uncomfortable in your lower back. So keep this lower core engaged. Okay, butt squeeze on, lunge forward, knees come past the toes, heel stays anchored to the ground, chest up, okay, but abs on, or you can even come down onto your knee, keeping the abs on. So now you're getting a slightly deeper stretch. So this is my angle here, knee, hip, shoulder, ear, still fairly in one line, but I've got this kind of core glute connection. So from here to here, now I'm starting to include a bit of rec fem, so that kind of long quad muscle, that's another hip flexor. From there, if I want to go any further, I can bring the hands down to the floor. Really starting to get into the length of the hip. And then from there I can come up into runner. And here we're starting, as soon as I lift that leg off, now the hip flexor muscles are taking the load against gravity, so they're going to be working a lot stronger. So when you tuck the toe, you lift the leg and a little bounce, you're going to start to open up this hip flexor muscle here. Now, if your hip flexors are weak, what will happen is you can stretch them out passively, but because they're weak, usually a muscle that's weak goes tight. It's a little bit counterintuitive, but typically that goes tight because it just hasn't got the functional strength to go to its full range of movements to stretch out all the way and then contract back. It just hasn't got that kind of physical strength to do that. So it just kind of like locks and holds. So when you weaken your hip flexors, when you're coming into these stretches, okay, as soon as you come out of them, basically everything just kind of locks up again. It goes very tight. So passive stretching is good for relaxation of the mind, okay, of the breath, okay, and relaxes the body, but doesn't really do anything to change flexibility at all. So you just got to keep that in mind. So that's where we're going to start to introduce the loaded hip flexor stretches. And we start from, again, that same position. So from kneeling, tuck your toes, and you can just slowly come up and down. But what you want to think about here is you're not just dropping into a passive joint where there's no contracting muscles. You want stabilization. So you want the abs on and the glutes on. So as you're kind of just sinking the hips down, that little glute contraction will help to open up neurologically the front of the hip. And then as you're building in the strength, the muscle itself will get stronger and you'll be able to increase your flexibility, increase your strength, increase your range of movement, all those kind of things. So once you can kind of get to this position fairly comfortably, you can do a good 30-second hold, feels pretty good, then we can start to load it in different positions. So we go to a low step, same thing, so now you're going to come into a lunge, knees past the toe as far as you can, sink the hip down, so you get a nice big opening stretch through here. Now a little just gentle bouncing at the bottom range just helps kind of feed back through the GTOs, the Golgi tendon organs, which are stretch sensors that measure stretch and length and force of muscles. That helps just to kind of like communicate to the central nervous system where you are in space. Okay, very gentle, and then holds. So you breathe in, breathe out, brace, sink into it, hold, breathe in, breathe out, brace, abs and glutes, on, sink, hold, then come off. And it gets a bit spicy in the hips, so I always like to tap it out a little bit. Okay, from there you can go slightly higher. Now when you're doing a higher step, it's actually a little bit easier on the hip because the angle is not as extreme. So if you're going to foot elevated, what you can do is just come up slightly higher, the knees past the toes, full ankle dorsiflexion, and at the same time you're going to energize this back leg, so you're going to push your heel down into the floor, squeeze your butt. So you're getting ankle, knee, hip mobility in the front. You're going to start to get this opening of the quad, hip flexor complex on the back leg. Like so. And then go into the holds. And in my yoga friends, if you've done any yoga before, your classic warrior one type stance. So your classic warrior one, okay, is a big hip flexor stretch there. So you're going to energize into that back foot, glutes engaged, open up the hip, and then do your classic warrior one type stance, wherever that's going to wind you up. So once you kind of can get into that stuff fairly comfortably, again, I like that 3 lots of 5 in little pulses. That tends to be a nice way to build up strength and mobility. Then you can start to add resistance or load. So in the lunge, pick a relatively lightweight, and you're just going to start off with a classic lunge exercise. So just take 1 foot back, 1 foot forward, classic lunge, hold the weight next to your hip. Okay, that little posterior pelvic tilt technique we did at the start, maintain that, and then focus on sinking the back leg down to the floor. You'll get a really nice deep stretch, and then come up. Good. Doesn't really matter where you hold the weight. Come down, abs on, glutes on, feel the stretch, knee sinking straight down, touch your toe, touch your knees, then come up. what you're trying to avoid is dumping. So as you're coming down, you dump into your lower back. So I can go a lot deeper, but I'm not stabilizing here at all. And I'm really kind of jamming my lower back here. So if the goal is to kind of stretch the hip flexors, slight tuck, okay, lower abs on, sink the rear knee down, and come up. So there's a kind of approach in strength training where weighted mobility, where you're just doing your squats, your hinges, your basic whatever movement, but you're doing it to the full range of movement, under load, slow and controlled. And that way you're getting the eccentric contraction, which is where the muscle lengthens out under tension, which is essentially stretching. So if you do your resistance training to the full range of movement with each movement you're practicing, over time you'll develop stretching. You'll basically be stretching the muscle, so then you'll develop that flexibility with the strength, which is what we want. Okay. Now, there's kind of this concept of the weakest link. So whichever part of your body is the weakest, that'll be the thing that holds you back the most. And for many people, it's the hip flexors, because we never train them to be strong. We just train them to stretch them. And we do heaps of ab work, but we don't actually train the hip flexors. So this is where we need the weight and strengthening. Next thing you can do, if you're feeling up for it, is just to start taking your leg longer. So long step back, and then you're trying to sink down with that knees over toe kind of concept. Knee to the floor, lower abs on, and then coming back up. So keep the heel connected to the floor, bring your knee past the toe as far as you can comfortably. Touch the rear knee down, chest up, abs on, and then lift up. Inhale down, exhale up. Inhale down, exhale up. 2 more times. Inhale down, exhale up. Inhale down, exhale up. So I really like this kind of technique, because one, you're training the lunge, you're getting that really good ankle, knee, hip mobility, you're getting the deep hip flexor stretch. You're connected to the core. If you do the breathing correctly, the breathing will sink in with the functional movement of the spine, so everything just feels really nice. If you want to progress that to the next stage, then you can add in rear foot elevated split squats, or Bulgarian split squats. So this one's pretty nasty. What you're going to do here is put a leg up on the bench. So let me move this out of the way. So you're going to put your foot up on the bench. Okay, hop forward. Okay, core on, and then you're just going to sink this rear knee down as far as you can go, and then bring it back up. Sink it down, sink it down, sink it down, and then bring it up. So as I'm sinking it down, get your balance. As I'm sinking it down, I'm getting a really big quad stretch now, and I'm also getting into that deep hip flexor stretch. So if your quads are super tight, you'll feel this straight away in the quads. It's fine to hold on to something for a bit of support, a bit of balance. Sink it down, bring it up, sink it down, inhale, abs on, exhale, up. Good. So you can get into the kind of the Bulgarian split squats. And of course you can start stepping out your feet longer if you need to do that any further. Next stage is that we can look at things like our lying back hip extension to stretch it out. Let's have a look at that one. So for this one, here's a bench we prepared earlier. Okay, in orthopedics, when we do an orthopedic test, we call this a Thomas test. So it's actually an assessment of how tight your hip flexors are. So you can do this at home. So what you do is you're going to lie back down, grab your left knee, hug it into your chest. Okay, good. Lie back so your lower back is flat into the bench. Pull your knee in, and then take your leg out straight and just let it hang. Now, hopefully, the thigh is a little bit level with the bench or a bit lower, okay, which means it's a fairly good hip flexor range. If you're super tight, what'll happen is your leg will be up here somewhere and you'll just be holding, okay, and that's a really big sign that we need to do some work on that hip flexor there. So let it hang. The other thing to look at is the knee bend here. If you lower your leg down and your leg's kind of like almost straight like that, that suggests sometimes a really tight ITB. Or if the leg gets pulled out to the side and rotates in, tight ITB or tight hip flexor. Okay, but so you want to let the knee bend and then sink down. And so this could be its own stretch position here because you've got gravity coming down and you're just resisting and holding here. So it could be a nice kind of introductory way to get someone's leg to stretch. You could do just little pulses, little bounces, and you're good to go. Now where people go wrong here is as they do it, if they're really tight through here, their lower back will arch up and you'll get a false positive. You think, oh, they can actually drop their knee down below the hip, but they can't. They need to be back here. So that's that hip flexor Thomas test, it's often called, which you can use just to add in your own stretching or to do a little self-assessment. Okay. If you're doing it on the ground, it would just be same thing on the ground. Here, leg out straight. If your leg goes to the floor, okay, and your lower back's fully compressed in, you can't go any further than that in terms of assessment, but that's a good starting position to be in. Okay, so now we go into leg levers and resisted band work. So in my little garage studio here, I don't have a cable system, but we do have lots of bands. So what you can do here is you just get a band. Okay. You want to anchor it around something. So just anchor it around that. Easy, easy. You're gonna lie down. Just takes a little bit of setting up. And you're gonna hook it around your feet, like so. And then you're just going to pull your knee in and out, like so. So you've got a little bit of resistance. Okay. Pulling in and out. Breathe in, breathe out. In, out. Now when you're doing, anytime you're using a band, one of the advantages of the band is because it's like it's a rubber band, it's going to stretch out and then it's going to recoil back. You want to resist the recoil back so you get only eccentric lengthening in the hip. So if you're using any kind of band for this exercise, use the recoil to slow it back and that'll help you develop more strength. If you're using a cable pulley system, you're going to still get that eccentric lengthening with the pulley. Okay, the sensation and feeling will be slightly different, but the principle's the same. You just want to slow it on the way back out because that's the eccentric phase, and that's where we want to get this muscle really strong. So we'll put that foot in there again. Lie back. Good. Brace your abs so you're not going to arch. Remember, like if your hip flexors are tight, it's going to make your lower back arch. So pull your bottom rib down, engage your core muscles. This other leg can be flat or you can have it bent as long as you're in neutral. Okay, and then you're tucking in, slow out. Tuck in, slow out. In, out, in, out. So if you're really weak, if your core's weak, what'll happen, go back a little bit so get more tension. You're going to breathe into here, and then as you pull back, the lower back's got to arch, because either you forgot to keep your core on, or you're weak through here, or you're not familiar with the technique, one or the above. Okay, so just keep that kind of connected core through here. And that's your resisted hip flexion with a band. So you could use an ankle weight, you could use a resisted band, you could use cables. They're all kind of the same but different. Okay. Again, I like working that kind of 3 lots of 5 rep space to kind of build up that strength.
And depending on your goal, you can go up to like 3 lots of 10, 3 lots of 15 to really get that strength endurance in. Remember, like, muscles need a certain amount of strength to do the job correctly, otherwise they just kind of tap out. So we want to make sure that we're building up that strength with control and to get where we want to get to. Next thing we can do is looking at leg levers. So classic kind of Pilates type movements here, where we're using the weight of the leg, tapping the floor, and increasing the lever gradually over time so that you're getting that kind of strengthening with the lever. So when we're doing this one, you're lying down. Okay. Two possible positions. You can be spine neutral. So if you give your bum a wriggle, anchor your weight at your sacrum, okay, shoulders away from the ears, find the natural curve in your lower back, and maintain that curve through the whole exercise. So it's not arching and you're not flattening, it's just neutral. To do that, keep your bottom rib down, tension the core muscles. So just think squeeze, and if you poke your finger into anywhere in your belly, okay, you'll feel the muscles stable there on, okay. Just all you need, just that little contraction there. Now, you're gonna lift one leg up in the air, keep the knee bent at 90, so not here, okay. And then lower your leg down, slowly control, keep the brace on and lower down slowly. Tap the foot, and then do the other side, lift up, brace, down slow. Okay, and then progression together, both legs up. Exhale on the way down, exhale, brace, without arching your lower back. So if I'm doing it incorrectly, I'm going to lift up, I'm going to arch as I lift up, okay, and then as I lower down, I'm going to arch even more. And that's because that hip flexor, that psoas, is going into my lumbar vertebrae, and it's creating that torque, which is going to create that lumbar extension. Okay. From here, from neutral spine, there you go to single leg levers. So you can go one leg out, 45 degrees, second leg out, 45 degrees. So this is a very gentle bicycle. Leg out to 45, and then lower down. And just tapping the floor. Keep your lower back neutral here. So again, just be mindful you're not arching, and then lift and pull back in, out, tap, in, and then of course that goes doubles, out to the 45, in, and then out, lower. Notice I'm not arching the back, my back is neutral, up, and tuck in, and release. And then you can go into flutter kicks. So you can go flutter kicks, so toe tapping, so just alternating toe tapping, bicycling, or flutter kicking. Okay. All working the hip flexor and maintaining the core muscle. All those exercises you can do in the low sit-up position. So just come up onto the tips of your shoulder blades. So you're going to have the spine slightly flexed. So the abs are going to be in a stronger position here. The pelvis will tilt a little bit. So what you'll notice is the range. You may not be tapping the floor just because the angle of the pelvis is lifted up. Okay, but depending on how flexed we are in the hip as well. Okay. So all the same things we just did. So low sit-up position, tuck your chin, look between the legs, toe taps, breathing in, breathing out, doubles, breathing in. Time it with the exhale, so breathe out slow and lower in timing with your exhale. And then bicycles, so out, out, double, double, or out, down, up, in, out, down, up, in, or double, in, and relax. So those progressions, so you start from single leg, knees bent, toe tap, to double legs, toe taps, and then you start with single leg, leg out, single leg, leg out, to double legs, out to the 45, out to the 45, and then out to the 45, tap the floor, lift, or double out to the 45, tap the floor just off, lift, tap in, and you're pretty good to go. In neutral or in the sit-up position, all works the same. And then once you get to that level, then you can kind of then go into other advanced ones as well. But in my experience with back rehab stuff, when we get people into the double leg lower, so the double leg lower being here, and do that for reps, you know, a good 3 lots of 5 again, that tends to really help with people's lower back pain if they're doing all the other things as well, because we're getting those hip flexors strong. Okay. So really great combo of exercises. Start off really small, progress up. Always check in with your health provider if you need any guidance on that. And the next level from there would be kind of then back onto the hanging leg raise, but now you're doing kind of more legs out straight, which they're really, really amazing exercises, really quite strong, but for the average person, probably don't need to go there unless you're really driven. If you're into martial arts, dance, acrobatics, those kind of things, or you just like a physical challenge. Nothing wrong with that at all. So that's a quick little guide into how I particularly approach psoas and hip flexors. I don't do a lot of hip flexor stretching per se. It's usually always, the stretching is more just preparing the tissue, and then we get into the strengthening exercises, which become the strengthening exercises themselves. Then we stretch to kind of like relax and calm the body down. So when the muscles are going really tight, we want to just let them relax. So stretching is almost more, it's not for flexibility, it's more neurological, to relaxing the body, let it calm down, let it release any tension. Because we want this kind of nice balance between contracting and relaxing. Contracting and relaxing, it's all about the balance in the body. Okay, so hope you enjoyed that. If you have any questions, please drop me a line, always happy to answer, and we'll see you in the next video.